Hello and welcome. He's wary of the term rock star economist, but he's courted by activist music stars such as U2's Bono. Time magazine has described him as one of the most influential people in the world in recent years, and he's advised numerous governments on economic reform. He believes we could end global poverty in our lifetime. This week on One-on-One, meet the outspoken Professor Jeffrey Sachs. His day jobs include heading up Columbia University's Earth Institute and the UN Millennium Project, aimed at reducing extreme poverty, disease and hunger by the year 2015. Jeffrey Sachs believes that so much is possible with the right will, as he explains in his best-selling book, The End of Poverty. Many argue that his greater skill is making the complex world of economics accessible to ordinary people, while his passion for stating his case has won him many high-level friends, from former US President Bill Clinton to the UN's Kofi Annan. He has proved himself. In the mid-1980s, he stabilized Bolivia's economy with a policy package that lowered the country's inflation rate from 40,000% to nearly zero. But his critics believe his cure-all arguments would be impossible to implement. That certainly won't stop Jeffrey Sachs from trying. Dr. Sachs, great to talk with you.
Now, thank you so much.
The phrase I hear most commonly associated with you is rock star economist. I think the fact that you're in the sort of popular culture now, with an area that's fairly dry otherwise, association with the entertainment world and so on. But you actually wear a number of hats, you have a number of jobs. So take me through those jobs, those titles you have, and what you're expected to do with each of those.
I was very honored to be asked by UN Secretary General Kofi Annan a few years ago to help find ways to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. Those are the goals that the whole world signed up to fight hunger, poverty, disease. We're not achieving them, so it's a big struggle, but there are lots of people, from rock stars to scientists to political leaders to community activists all over the world, that are fighting to achieve them. And I'm very proud and happy and honored to be part of that effort. I'm also an academic economist. I'm a professor at Columbia University. And I am also very lucky to direct a wonderful institution called the Earth Institute, trying to understand how the world holds together, from the physical systems like climate and disease to the economics of wealth and poverty.
When you agreed to all three, did you consider there are only 24 hours in a day?
There are. Well, yeah, we do have to find some solutions to that. There's so much to do. When you lose time on these efforts for people in the wealthy world, time is money, or time is inconvenience. But for people in the poor world, losing time means losing lives. And so there's an urgency to this. Every day, thousands of people are dying because they're too poor to stay alive. We have to do something with as much urgency as we can, obviously, to stop that misery.
Now, in the work you're doing, you've also made friends with people in the entertainment field. The whole Band-Aid, Live Aid movement was a big thing. It actually pushed a lot into the general public. Notably, Bono is one of your friends, the U2 lead singer and activist. What value do people like Bono add to the work you do? How do you find they help what you're trying to achieve?
Well, I hope I'm helping them, and they're certainly helping what we're trying to do. So it's not that they are helping me, but it's a global effort. If we're going to end extreme poverty, this is a society-wide movement. It's a worldwide movement. It's not a technical dial. It's not a flick of the switch. It's got to be a commitment that is worldwide, and it has to reach down into every place. It's a political leader, say the President of the United States, maybe they ought to act on their own, but they won't act on their own unless there's a groundswell of demand for action to help the poor from the American people, for example. So I regard this fight against extreme poverty, the role models that I see are Gandhi, not for me, but I mean in terms of this mass social movement. Not making a personal comparison, I'm saying that the way Gandhi mobilized the mass public, or the way that Martin Luther King Jr. mobilized the mass public in the civil rights movement, we need people all over society that are mobilizing the mass public to be involved in this fight against extreme poverty. And that's why people that have reach like Bono, that reach tens, hundreds of millions, even billions if you consider all the people that watch the shows, the concerts, the videos, download the music, and all the rest. People like Angelina Jolie and others who are taking on these commitments. Great African singers like Angelique Kidjo and Youssou N'Dour that are saying we need to help the public understand what's possible. This is not incidental. You know, lots of pundits say, well, that's just celebrity. Those are just celebrities piping off. They don't understand. The world needs to have this kind of mass communication. There's 6.5 billion of us. And so we have to be talking to each other, and there are these wonderful people that reach huge audiences, and if they're conveying an important message, that is vital for the work on this planet, for a peaceful planet.
Of course, you know, whether it's cynicism or just, you know, the way the world order is, but people will look and say, look, here's a successful white man, an economist, academic, and successful person giving us solutions. Here's a white rock star giving us solutions. I presume the addition of people like Youssou N'Dour, Angelique Kidjo, Africans who want to support Africa, getting local people to state their causes adds a lot more value.
Yeah, I would regard it as a little bit racist for people to say, well, you're white, you can't help Africa. And on the other side, there are so many wonderful African leaders that I'm working with all the time. Charity Ngilu, the Minister of Health of Kenya, who's trying to bring health to the people. One of my colleagues, Yassine Fall, a Senegalese woman who has put together a whole network of women leaders in Africa. Wangari Maathai, the Nobel Prize winner in Africa. This has to transcend skin color. There's just no question. It has to transcend any country. It has to transcend religion. This has to be a global effort. And my whole theory of life is that what unites us around the world is so vastly more important than what divides us, that these kinds of claims they're just wrong.
There is a lot of, obviously, counter-theory and counter-theory in economics, and when your critics say you simplify things too much or that you use analysis that favors your theories, perhaps sound bites that work, how do you address those criticisms?
Well, this is a remarkable field because we're in the middle of it. It's not something you look under a microscope. It's not something that you solve in a test tube. We're all in the midst of economic life, and so everybody has judgments and so on. The key, I believe, is to try to be as systematic in thinking as possible. And for me, what's been absolutely critical beyond question is seeing a lot of the world. Because a lot of people have theories about their place, and then they assume that if it's true here, that's the general principle. And what I found is in working in Latin America, in Europe, in South Asia, in East Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, the simple generalizations don't work. There are some commonalities because we're all human beings after all. We all share the same physical world, but the places we live are so different, the circumstances are so different, that you have to understand those differences, and most economics, I think, has failed in that direction of making the clear distinctions as well as finding the similarities.
Let's look at where you came from, your own background. A couple of generations ago, I gather your own family was fairly poor, and it's only through your parents and so on that you've managed to rise up from that. What stories of hardships and poverty were sort of passed down to you as an example of what your own family had been through as you were growing up?
I think if almost anybody, by the way, in the world looks back 2 or 3 or 4 generations, unless you're one of the few that came from an aristocratic family, and very few did by definition, our forebears were very poor. Mine were in Central Europe. They emigrated to the United States around 1900. They struggled to find jobs and employment, lived a very basic life with very little education. They went through the Great Depression era of the 1930s, barely holding on. But what they did in my family, which was so lucky, was that they worked incredibly hard to ensure that their children, my parents, would get an education. And so my grandparents, my father's parents, had only the most basic few years of primary school, but my father was able to get a university degree, become a labor lawyer, and then he not only taught me a lot of values and passed on a lot of values, but also made sure that my sister and me would that my sister and I would get an education. And this is really the profound gift, generation to generation.
And you grew up in Detroit. You were saying your father, with his background as a lawyer, what kind of influence did he have on you as a young man, on your views of society and the way things worked?
I think my father surely had the greatest influence on me. He was a civil rights lawyer. He was a constitutional lawyer. He was a labor lawyer. So he was always fighting for the downtrodden. And of course, that's something that is pretty fundamentally important to me and inspired by him. My mother's father had a great influence. He was an immigrant, and he basically taught me, well, many things, but I'd say most importantly, don't believe in superstition. Use your head, go for science, try to understand. And it's these values, I think, are so absolutely fortunate to have had instilled.
Jeffrey Sachs, don't go away. We're going to take a short break here on 101. We'll be back in just a moment.